I noticed that many of the excerpts from your other plays are meant to just hammer home the point that King Arthur, he more or less fails in his own potential that you see in the first play. Like I mentioned this in a previous discussion, you have somewhere near the end a scene from a play where you confront a woman that you knew back in the 80s, or you went to a poetry workshop together, and she just stopped writing poetry at some point, right? She just she said life got in the way, right? The classic excuse for pretty much anything, right? Like that's always been the excuse, and this is just kind of like a recapitulation in the sense of like what Arthur himself is going through, and I can't help but feel that Arthur is almost kind of like an allegory for any kind of failure. It could be artistic failure in particular. Maybe I'm reading that myself because I have to always be aware of like whether or not I will end up one of these types that just forgets art and moves on to more prosaic things. Would you say that that's kind of the primary function of these excerpts, or how else do you do these excerpts other than hammering home this point of like lost potential and myopia?
Well, hopefully, as long as you have me in your life, you won't veer too far from the arts. But
just a comment on that. Yeah, I think it is very helpful because if I ever go a long period of time without writing, I'm thinking like, fuck, I am letting down Dan, right? Like, and I do feel these obligations, and anybody that got anything from Cosmoetica, like everybody has an obligation, right? I do believe that.
As far as the using of other excerpts, you've read these plays closer in time. One of the things that I've learned to do is the power of forgetting. So when I'm writing something, anything, whether it's a Norwegian in the Family, this current novel, or the plays, I bring a focus to that, and I think very few human beings have ever had the ability to focus on something the way I did. But then once I'm done, I let it go. And the reason I do so is that I don't consciously repeat myself and fall into traps. So why I used a particular scene or whatnot, if I read it, if I read the play again, I could say, oh yeah, I used that because of A, B, or C. But I don't really focus on that kind of thing. There was probably a good reason for everything that I did. Most of the time, it's going to work and work very splendidly. Yeah, you're closer in time, and what I intend doesn't matter as much as what the recipient gets, hopefully.
Yeah. This is like a minor point, but before I forget this. So the character Morgan Le Fay, in the kind of like Arthur, like the various Arthur cycles, she's variously either an ally of Arthur. She could be a villain. She could be an evildoer in some other ways, depending on the work that you read. I noticed though that when I finished the quintet, the one character that sort of like didn't really stick in my mind was Morgan Le Fay. Like, what was her function there, and like, what was she playing any of these kind of like classical roles that are available like in the older legends, or did you like invent something new for her?
No, she's the younger sister. She knows the least about their origins, and she's there to just show that because Morgause turns out to be, by the fifth play, Morgause turns out to be a monster, a child abusing, incestuous, motherly monster, and I patterned her after the mother in the Manchurian Candidate. But Morgan Le Fay is basically just there to move the plot along, and she provides a bit of a sounding board at several instances for the revelation that they are not Uther Pendragon's lineage, but they're from a different lineage, which ends up turning out to be the Fisher King.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I thought I was experiencing a personal failure in not appreciating some other layers, but and that's the thing. Like, you sort of do need some sounding boards. Like in a set of plays like this, you have tons and tons of characters. Some of them are kind of like more traditionally functional in the sense that they have a function to play. Others are just like, just flat out great characters that are there for one reason only, which is to be, human and hyper realistic in some sense.
I have 4 or 5, I think, minor servants that appear to some of the major characters, and they're the bakers, or they're the maids or whatnot, and they just appear in a scene or two. They say something. You could imagine these characters, those minor characters, talking about, oh, Jesus Christ, the Queen was going off again about Lancelot and her hate for Dagonet, or Arthur again was going off about that old fool Merlin. I just wish he would let that fucking relic. You get the sense that the real people, probably the more interesting people, to go back to like the BBC production of Upstairs Downstairs back in the 1970s, which was about the servants in a rich family. That these people probably are more interesting and more Cassavetes in some ways than the major characters. But no one wants to read about necessarily these minor characters. Maybe at some point I'll do that, but I doubt it.
Yeah.